and welcome. So we are going to take a pause from some of the content learning and focus on exam content. Now, I don't want to give you a percentage of exam content to kind of knowledge content of what's important. They go hand in hand. Like, you really do need to understand what the examiner is expecting from you and what you need to provide to make sure you're getting the top kind of marks and making sure you're getting the grade that you deserve, basically. So today we're going to have a look at this 15-mark question. Now, it's an adapted 15-mark question. It hasn't come up in the exam, but the case study that I am referring to here is the 2017 June Paper 1 case study. So do feel free to go and have a look. But I will also just input that figure 1 that I've referenced to kind of here, so you'll be able to see it kind of up in the corner right now. And I'll read the question to you while this is over the top as well, so that you know exactly what it is. So it's discussed the possible impact of monopoly power in the UK supermarket sector on both consumers and producers. Refer to figure 1 and your own knowledge in your answer, 15 marks. Now, these questions come up all the time where it says about consumer and producer. If you see that question, thank the gods, thank whoever, because it is a lovely, lovely question. Your structure is handed to you on a plate. So when you see these questions, you should be nothing but happy. They're lovely questions that require you to kind of not worry too much about the structure because it's already handed to you. So thinking about that, we're going to have a look at what the structure is. What I suggest you do is try and pause now and answer the question. But if you're really struggling and you've never really done or you've never really been successful at 15-mark questions before, then you can kind of carry on for the next bit of the video and then pause. Or if you want to challenge yourself, then have a pause now and answer the question in timed conditions. So this is the structure that you are looking at. So you're looking at 2 analysis points at level 3 and 2 evaluation points at level 3. Now, analysis, these are the marks breakdown. So if you get level 1 across both your analysis points, then you'll get 1 to 3 marks. Level 2, you'll get 4 to 6, and level 3, you'll get 7 to 9. And for your evaluation, level 1, 1 to 2, level 2, 3 to 4, and level 3, 5 to 6, sorry. So, like I said, those questions where it asks for consumer and producer, or any 2 individuals, it could be producer and supply chain, or it could be any 2 individuals in the market, are amazing or wonderful questions. Now, they are great questions because you just split your answer in half. So you do 1 analysis and 1 evaluation on the producer and 1 analysis and 1 evaluation on the consumer. So you don't have to worry about, okay, I need to do this point here and then this point here. Your planning should be relatively quick because you know half of your answer is going to be on consumer, half of your answer is going to be on producer. So we love these questions. They're really nice questions. So one thing that you need to understand about your evaluation is that you are marked as a whole. So your evaluation is marked as a whole. Both points of evaluation and your both points of analysis are marked together, right? So for instance, as I'm marking as an examiner, but also when I mark my own students' work, when I mark your work, then you will see that next to each paragraph I'll write L1, L2, L3 with an arrow up or down. So it may well be L1 up or L3 down, L2 with a dash in the middle, and that lets you know where that paragraph kind of sits. Now, I do that for analysis and I do that for evaluation, and then overall I look at where you've been and I will mark you. Now, there is no set kind of rules as to averaging out, or if you get 2 level 3, you know, you're guaranteed top level 3. That's not how it works. I know that that is frustrating, but actually it's not how it works. If you have 1 high level 3 paragraph or 1 level 3 paragraph in general, and 1 level 1 paragraph in general, that does not guarantee that you are going to get level 2 just because it's in the middle. Now, you may end up getting level 2 because overall you've hit the criteria for level 2, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get level 2 overall. It may well mean that your level 3 paragraph is so good and strong and in-depth that you may end up getting low level 3, or your level 3 paragraph is so low that you might end up getting low level 2 with your level 1 paragraph dropping it down. So it very much depends on the kind of overall whether you've hit that criteria, and I know that that is frustrating and confusing. Every year I have students being like, but I got level 3 here and then I got level 1 here, and why have I got low level 2? And it's because overall, when I read your whole analysis, overall I think you fit into the criteria for level 2 or potentially level 3 level 1. And the same with your evaluation as well. So you might fit into level 1, level 2, level 3. If you get 2 level 3 paragraphs, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get that top level 3. If you've got 2 level 3, low level 3 paragraphs, you may well still only get 5 rather than the 6, right? So when you're marking your work, or when your teacher is marking your work, just to ask them about which level was this and why. Because really that's what you care about. Your marks, I know that you care about, but actually what you should care about is moving up through the levels, because that will gain you the better marks. The criteria is what, so you should focus on that. So your marks as a whole, definitions, introduction with a definition. A monopoly, in this case it would be, a monopoly is when you have 25% of the market share of legal, is considered a legal monopoly. You don't need it, at all. So you might see on the mark scheme that you get like KAA and it will tell you the individual marks, but actually they're useless, they don't matter. You're marked in the levels is what's important. So I very much advise no introduction whatsoever, just start answering that question. So what is the impact? What impact on the producer is, boom, then talk to me through it. Or impact on the consumer are, boom, talk me through it. Don't give me definitions, you don't need it. Unless you are literally going for level 1 and that is it, maybe you might get a mark for a definition, but I don't think that you potentially are guaranteed to, right? Because the question doesn't ask you what is a monopoly. The question asks you the impact of monopoly power in the UK supermarket sector on producers and consumers. So if you were struggled before and you didn't pause now, try and answer that question. Some of the videos that previously might help you answer this question may well be the theoretical monopoly video, the legal monopoly video. You might want to have a look at some of the oligopoly videos as well, and potentially some of the price discrimination videos. Those will help you to create an answer for this question if you are looking, right? If you don't know, if you're confused or if you're struggling. So, like I said, we're going to do half of our question, 1 analysis and 1 evaluation on the consumer, and 1 analysis and 1 evaluation on the producer. Now, when you answer these questions, I've got 4 examples, I think, on both of analysis and evaluation points that you can say. That does not mean that they are the only 4 analysis points that you could possibly use. There are lots of analysis and evaluation points that you can use, and to be honest, you should be challenging yourselves when it comes to answering these questions when somebody's marking you and giving you feedback, or you're looking at this and you're getting feedback. Because these are the times when you can kind of push your economic knowledge, right? And you can push yourself to kind of do some left field answers, some unusual answers, and see where you land. Challenge yourself, get interesting. So just because I've got 4 here, they are by no means the only 4 that you can use. So the first half that I've done, I know there's a lot here, but don't worry, we're going to go through it step by step, is the producer side. Now you have a choice when you're talking about the producer. So you can either talk about the impact of monopoly power on Tesco's, because Tesco's is the monopoly, the individual in the market that may potentially have monopoly power, because I think that they've got like 29% of the market share, which is over the 25% for a legal monopoly. So they may be subject to some monopoly power. Or you can talk about the other producers in the market. So you can talk about the effect of Tesco's potentially having monopoly power on the other producers in the market. You don't have to just talk about Tesco's. I've actually given you 2 examples of ones that you can talk about for each. So the first one, the one that I think that most of you would use, is the theoretical monopoly kind of theory there. So looking at price setting power. So you would probably start with something like, one of the impacts of potential monopoly power in the UK supermarket sector is that Tesco's will have more price setting power. This means that they will be able to set their price at their profit maximising position, which means that they are able to maximise their profits in the market rather than being subjected to the kinked demand price. So, and then what you might use there is the diagram, the theoretical monopoly diagram. Again, if you're not entirely familiar or you're not entirely sure, have a look at that video. I think it was last couple of weeks ago. So there is your kind of paragraph there. Now I've set this up, this is note formation. You will obviously kind of pad that out and explain it in depth, step-by-step analysis. This is kind of very basic step-by-step here. Now, I always get asked, do you have to do diagrams? Do you have to do kind of a matrix or a diagram or something in a 15-mark question? Now, my answer to that is not always no. Now, we know that not all theory in economics has an attached diagram to it. If you're talking about contestability, for instance, you may not be adding a diagram to that. But a diagram speaks 1,000 words, and if your diagram mirrors your analysis, your written analysis, then it will do you nothing but great things. If a student can produce well-written analysis and an accompanying diagram, I'm definitely thinking level 3. I'm definitely thinking, okay, the student really understands and is able to apply theory diagrammatically. You're gonna do well, right? So it's not like a necessity. There's no rule that says you have to do it, but you're definitely gonna do better if you do it and you do it correctly and you do it right. So I'm just going to go through the analysis. The evaluation is in blue, but I'll get to that in a moment. One of the other things that you could talk about is potentially Tesco's has the power to maybe bully other people in the market to start a cartel. So they might force smaller firms, that may well be Asda or Sainsbury's. Asda and Sainsbury's both have like 16, 17%, or Morrison's. The Co-op, I think Morrison's has like 11% and the Co-op has like 7%, 6% in the market, to form a cartel to set prices higher, because obviously it's quite an oligopoly structure. Well, it is an oligopoly structure. Just because it does have some market power within it, monopoly power within it, doesn't mean it's not an oligopoly structure. And therefore, they might say to those or approach those others at the industry meeting or wherever else their kind of price fixing occurs and force them to set a higher price. And therefore, they have the power to be able to do that. Now, the accompanying theory to that would be obviously game theory. I would expect to see a matrix where you show the kind of collusion price that's not the Nash equilibrium. It's not like tacit collusion under a 2x2 matrix. That's the theory that I would expect you to be putting for this one for Tesco's. So one of the effects on the smaller firms, and you can talk about this kind of flipped as an effect on the smaller firm as well, that would be absolutely fine. You wouldn't have to, that would be a good answer, depending on whether you explained it properly. So one of the effects on the smaller firm is that they have to follow the market leader, right? We know that even in an oligopoly, one of the effects of having some monopoly power might be you get to set that king demand price, you get to set the price in the market, and that's like a benefit for you. But whereas for other firms, they have to follow that price. And obviously, they have to follow that market leader, which could push up costs. So one of the things, there's two things that could happen here, is that either one, they have to follow the market leader and they have to set that king demand price, which for Tesco's might be its profit maximising price, but for the smaller firms may well be less than its profit maximising price. So they're making less supernormal profits than they would do if they didn't have to follow a leader with monopoly kind of power in the market. But one of the other things that you can talk about as well is that if the market leader does it, you have to do it to keep up. And one of those things may well be to do with advertising or not any form of non-price competition. Now we see that is rife in the supermarket industry. There's loads of non-price competition. And if Tesco starts doing it, then you as Asda or Waitrose or Sainsbury's or Morrison's have to also follow that as well. And that could increase your costs, right? Now, you've got to be specific here. I care about specifics. Would you probably get away with it if you move your MC and your AC? Well, it depends. But I'm pretty pernickety about that. I think if it's a fixed cost like advertising, you should really just move your AC and put that there. If it's, we'll look a little bit later on as to whether or not when it's a variable cost, obviously you shift your MC and your AC up. And that affects the amount of supernormal profit that you're also going to make. And that could push you out the market. Having to engage in a huge advertising campaign could push you out the market and mean that you are not able to compete anymore. Obviously the accompanying theory for that would be a cost and revenue diagram, or as I refer to, a theory of the firm diagram. Those are the two, that's the one diagram that you'd be expected, but those are the two effects that you could talk about under that. Now, one of the other ones for a smaller firm is that you can talk about the fact that they're going to have less buying power, less economies of scale. I've put E of S here, but that means economies of scale. They can have less economies of scale and therefore have less buying power in the market. If you've got less buying power in the market, then obviously you are going to face a higher raw material cost than the firm that has a lot of buying power in the market. Tesco saying I want to fill all of my supermarkets with this particular product means that they're going to get a much lower cost than you as a much smaller firm, because you're not going to be buying as much. And equally, especially in the supermarket sector, you may not have as many access to producers. So the biggest farm, the most efficient farm, may be just able to fulfill the orders for Tesco, and therefore you may not have as much buying power when it comes to producers, or even having access to producers as much as the one who has monopoly power, in this case Tesco's, in the market. And that might affect you by your AC and MC, but it also might affect you by how much product you're actually able to buy or bring to the market. So again, that would affect your AC and MC in that case, especially if you're talking about your kind of variable costs of buying produce for you to sell in the supermarket industry. So looking at valuation for this side of the producer side of the question. Now, for me, evaluation has to be balanced. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't sound generic. It doesn't sound like it doesn't match your evaluation point. Now, as always, I very much follow the rule of your analysis is in theory, on paper. The economic theory tells me that A will lead to B, which will lead to C, and here's a diagram to show what I have just said theoretically. And then your evaluation is the reality of but actually in reality, in the world that we see around us, that doesn't always happen, because when we remove that ceteris paribus, there are lots of other things that actually aren't held constant, and we need to bring those in because they have a real effect on the market. So for our Tesco's price setting power, actually if you were setting prices in the market that was so high, kind of maximising your profits without any issues or fear, you would have some CMA involvement. You may well be fined. Now, that's a very basic evaluation. I'm going to expect you to take it that next level forward and actually link it to some real balance here. And that's where this section comes here. So less profit overall. If the fine is greater than the price setting power difference between monopoly and oligopoly, then, or the normal market conditions price, then the firm will make a loss, right? So Tesco's will make a loss. So for instance, if the firm has been able to make an extra £4 million of profit through price setting power, and then the CMA comes along and fines them £6 million, then actually their AC may rise so much that they've actually been that supernormal profit has been fined away, but also additionally they're now making less profit than they were by just sticking with the normal market price. Now that little extra step will take you to that balance, it will take you further, and it links in the CMA to exactly what you're saying about price setting power here. So that's what I kind of mean by balance. So for this one, the idea of Tesco starting a cartel, obviously if you've done a game theory matrix and you've done it correctly, you should have the incentive to cheat there. So, and again, you need to link that to the supermarket industry, so you can talk about one of the smaller firms, maybe Morrison's only got 11% market share. They may well speak to the CMA about any cartel that's been formed, because it allows them to be in a much better position, and it also means that they may potentially be immune from the fine, whistleblowing, etc, etc. So for this one, you may link it to your game theory matrix, and you also may link it to a smaller firm in the market actually having the incentive to be able to cheat, because it allows them some advantage when it comes to the CMA. So when we're talking about a smaller firm here, actually we know that when it comes to the idea of monopoly, it's actually more complex than that. It's way more complex than that. When you think about smaller firms can actually have a local monopoly. So for instance, I know obviously we are in London, but if you think about a small town somewhere, like a small town in the northeast, is not going to have a Tesco's, an Asda, a Sainsbury's, a Morrison's, and a Waitrose all within distance, kind of commuting, travelling distance. They're very much likely to actually only have one of those, to have one of those firms in the market. So actually, in reality, what we may find is that smaller firms survive and actually end up doing very well because they're able to have like local monopolies, or they're able to kind of have a local area or specialise in opening up in rural areas rather than just having like huge mega stores somewhere. They may decide in small town centres to just have like a Sainsbury's local and focus all of their abilities on just creating Sainsbury's locals in smaller areas and actually build up quite a good kind of base for themselves of local monopolies, so they're not competing with the huge Tesco's, right? So actually, in reality, it's far more complex when we look at kind of local areas. And then here, we've got the idea of less economies of scale, buying power. Well, actually, we can talk about specialisation, and firms are able to specialise and create kind of markets for themselves. Now, we can see that in the supermarket industry when we think about like Waitrose. Waitrose may only have like, you know, kind of 5%, 4, 5, 6% of the market share, but they're definitely very secure in that market share. I mean, maybe kind of lately they've had Marks and Spencer Simply Food kind of come and compete a little bit, but they're actually quite secure in that market share because they've specialised, and they've specialised in that idea of kind of like quality and service. You know, if you go to a Waitrose, there are more people per shop, so more workers per shop in Waitrose than there are in Asda and Tesco's, because Waitrose has specialised in the idea of customer service, and they've specialised in the kind of, you know, the idea of quality of goods. So they have things that you may not be able to get in Tesco's or in Asda. So they've been able to specialise. So actually the idea of Tesco's having this huge monopoly power actually might not influence Marks and Spencer Simply Food or Waitrose, because they've got a smaller specialised segment of the market and they're doing well within that. Because the market as a whole, you might have this huge industry, but actually the market is broken up, and firms can create like smaller pockets of monopoly through specialising rather than thinking about the whole market as a whole, so the whole groceries market. So this is our kind of producer side. So as you can see, I've got your analysis and then I've got the balanced evaluation here. So we're going to have a look at the consumer side now. So for the consumer, I've got 3 here. I thought I'd do 4, but I've only done 3. That's fine. And again, I will just remind you that you could have anything else here as long as it's valid. Then you would have been absolutely fine. Now, I've kind of tried to balance them a little bit by looking at the same things, but you don't have to do that. That's a depth that isn't necessary, but you know, it's nice for an overall flow of an essay. So here for the consumer, I've literally just balanced that first producer point that we had about monopoly price setting power, and I've talked here about excessive price setting power. Obviously then you would draw that diagram, so the industry monopoly diagram. Have a look at the video before so you can see them side by side, and you can see that the price setting power has meant that consumer surplus has reduced, and therefore consumer surplus is what we consider to be the welfare of the consumer overall, and therefore the welfare of the consumer has reduced. And you could write that out kind of step by step and show the reduction on a diagram, and that would be pretty much level 3. Be a lovely answer. I very much enjoy reading that answer. Or you could talk about a lack of innovation for customers. So we know if a firm has monopoly power, then they have command of the market, right? They're not facing much competition, and therefore there is very little incentive for them to use that massive amount of supernormal profit to invest in innovation for the consumer. So the consumer may well just be getting kind of the same level of product continuously through the monopoly power without actually seeing any benefits from that monopoly power. There are some benefits of monopoly power when it comes to, say, you know, obviously this is a supermarket industry. If we talk about pharmaceuticals, you can talk about like the amount of research and investment they could do. So if there is a monopoly there, they're not incentivized to do that, so therefore the consumer's not going to get any innovation or be better off, even though they have a smaller amount of consumer surplus to do with price. And then finally, well not finally, but the last one that I have on here, is that there's less choice, obviously. So a monopoly may not provide all goods or services to the market, so not all markets are going to exist. So for instance, we've got Tesco's. If Tesco's decided to not bring forward or to focus like vegan or vegetarian products in its store, if they're the only one, if they're the biggest one, then that means that some people just opt out of the market. They're not able to enter the market to go and buy their groceries, to go and buy certain things that they want to buy, because the one individual who has the monopoly power has decided that they're not going to it's not worthwhile them producing it or putting that forward into the market. So then, all of the consumers that want that product or would normally be able to enter the market actually don't get access to that product. So, you can call that missing markets if you want to call that missing markets, or you can just say that consumers are excluded from the market that would otherwise be entered into it through the lack of provision of goods and services. So just looking at our balanced evaluation for that, and again, just to remind you, your evaluation is very much in reality. So we may well have excessive price setting and lots of consumer surplus in theory, but actually in reality, that a legal monopoly doesn't mean monopoly market power, right? And even though Tesco has a legal monopoly, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have monopoly market power. Actually, monopoly market power is the ability to influence and to be able to kind of take advantage of consumers and other producers potentially in the market. And we can see here that actually there isn't any independent decision making. We have monopolies that make independent decision making, and very much in the supermarkets industry we see interdependent decision making, and therefore there isn't that much price setting power, PSP, price setting power. Tesco still very much has to think about what's going to happen if it increases those prices. Game theory matrix there, just if your own brain, you wouldn't need to provide one, but it's still able to see that if it increases its prices, it's going to lose out and consumers are going to go elsewhere. So despite them actually having a legal monopoly, on paper this is true, but actually in reality, legal monopoly doesn't necessarily mean monopoly power, right? So that would be your balance there, like that would be your theory and reality. So here, even though there might be a monopoly and Tesco might be a monopoly, we know that actually firms respond to the threat of new competition as much or equally as they do new competition in the market. So they may act as if there is a competitor in the market to keep that market share, even though a competitor does not exist, right? So Tesco's may well have a monopoly, but they might act as if they are not a monopoly to be able to keep that monopoly share, that market share, because they act as if there is a threat. Because if they didn't and they started getting complacent, then another firm could enter the market and kind of take that monopoly share from them. And therefore, they do act as if they are, they have competition, even when they don't, right? And we can see that that's very true here, because despite having a legal monopoly, there are other firms in the market that could well come along and take that market share from Tesco's if they decided to act kind of non-competitively or in the worst kind of outcome for the consumer. And therefore, they act as if, even despite having legal monopoly power, they actually act as if they are not a legal monopoly in the market. And then finally, obviously you've got less choice for a monopoly. Well, we can say that actually this is true, but in reality, the supermarket industry doesn't exhibit this type of behaviour, and despite there being a legal monopoly, it's still very much an oligopoly structured market, because we do see that there's specialization, we do see that firms compete with each other, we do see that, when Asda launched its range of vegan products, Tesco then launched a range of vegan products, which then meant that, Marks and Spencer's Food launched a range of vegan products, because they all need to keep up with each other. They have a lot of interdependent decision making. So, therefore, actually in reality, this is true on paper, but when we actually look at the market, it doesn't exhibit those kind of characteristics of a monopoly. So I hope that this has been useful for you to see. The last thing that I kind of want to go through with you is this. This is what I get asked a lot, which is a conclusion. Do I include a conclusion? And that's a really simple and quick answer for you, and it is no. I don't need a conclusion for a 15-mark question. I don't need it at all. So, having finished this video, what you might be concerned and asking yourself is, well, what is a level 1, level 2, level 3 paragraph? And in my next video, that is exactly what we're going to go through. We're going to go through examples of a level 1 paragraph, a level 2 paragraph, and a level 3 paragraph. And you can see the physical difference in those 3 paragraphs. So I hope that this has been useful. I hope going through a 15-mark question has been useful, and I look forward to going through the levels with you all. So thank you very much and enjoy. Bye!